Hey guys, it's been like 3 weeks since I did the last episode of Picard Peruses, but it feels like it's been longer than that. Like, time is an illusion this summer. I simultaneously cannot believe that it's gonna be July this Friday, and simultaneously feel like I'm still in like March. So it's I'm glad to be back for the next episode. It's, what am I on? Oh, I'm on episode 10 this time, which is like, cute little milestone. Today I'm stuck between like I want to try to get this done and get this episode out as fast as possible, but then also like I don't want to rush it too much because I have a lot to cover today. Also, people are coming in the apartment building, so I don't know if there's gonna be like children sounds in the background, but that's happening. But yeah, so I hope you guys have been, doing well, as well as you can, and just really enjoying this weirdly fast, slow burn of a summer so far. I cannot be the only person to feel like this, right? No, I'm not. Clearly, I'm not. But like, let me know. Let me know if time is also a really weird construct for you guys in the comments. So, let me see. I don't think I have anything else to. Oh, I don't. Okay, I don't know if I'm going to be doing a. I don't know if I'm going to be doing a speed paint for this episode, just because the next speed paint that I have is the one where I designed like a bunch of government officials, and I feel like because I want to do my next episode, I think is going to be the Q&A episode where I answer a lot of people's like world building and character questions, and I feel like that would be better for that, so I can like pair that up with how I explain the way that I design characters. So may or may not have a probably not. If you're watching this, you can tell whether or not I decided to put one in there, but this is probably not. I probably just put my my worksheets up so that way you can like follow along with what I am going to be going over. Which, let's get into that. This episode is about my character portion of the hierarchy. It was the like secondary character, well, supposed to be the main characters, secondary characters, character dynamics portion of the hierarchy, which maybe I'll put that up so you can see like where I was supposed to be at. But I decided to I decided to get rid of the secondary characters part because like I didn't want to go too detailed on stuff like that. Mainly because I was struggling. I was fighting for my life to figure out who my main characters were, and I narrowed them down to 32, so I didn't really want to go past. I didn't really want to like work on character sheets for like more than 32 characters. Forgive me, but yeah. So I X'd that out. I keep wanting to say exit. I X'd it out. I crossed it out, if you will, and I also crossed out the character dynamics portion, or like I think it's character dynamics or team dynamics, or let me see, I have it over here, hold on. Yeah, the character dynamics portion, because as you'll see on when I talk about the actual sheet, or you can probably see it on the sheet if I put those up, but I have a whole section about like character relationships, and that kind of did what I needed it to do as far as like figuring out what the dynamics were. So yeah, I had 3 separate stages. Was originally supposed to be just one stage after I crossed out what I needed to cross out. It was supposed to be just like the main character stage, but I ended up having 3 separate stages, and this was as crazy of a process. Maybe, you know what, maybe not as crazy. It was definitely more tame of a process when it came to like a comparison to the episode 8, the narrative situation, because it wasn't then again maybe it because the in episode 8 I was talking about how the events stacked, and the stages that I needed to do stacked on top of one another. So I would do one and then figure out, or then realize like, oh wait, I gotta do this thing too, and then I gotta do this thing too. And it was kind of like that here, but it was definitely more manageable because I had a finite amount of characters. So if I had to add another stage, I was only doing it for that finite amount of characters. So it was a lot more manageable here, but I did have, even though I crossed out secondary characters and team character dynamics, I did still end up having 3 stages to go through, one of which was not even like character related. But I was trying to figure out if I want to just say it. You know what? Yeah, I'll just say the 3 stages. Then I'm gonna go through them one by one. The first stage are the individual character sheets. The second stage is the checklists, and I'll explain more about that when I get into that. And then the third stage were the most important documents, which again we'll explain when I get there. But like, it was really some shit that I should have figured out beforehand. But you know, you win some, you lose some. So I'm gonna go into the individual character sheets, and I just like, I'm almost tempted to not mention this, but like, just full transparency, I'm so sorry if I sound robotic but reading these coming up, but like, I tried to record this episode last night, and every time I went off script, because I actually have like a pretty robust script this time around, every time I went off script, it got really bad. So I just ended up like, I literally, oh my god, I'm just thinking about it now, I'm sorry. Because I just remember like, I went off script and the whole section fell apart. And I just stopped my recording. It was like 26 minutes in, I just stopped my recording, turned off my computer, and went to the couch to watch Our Flag Means Death. I was so salty last night. Oh man. Oh god. Okay. All right. Let me. Man, it was interesting. But yes. So sorry if I sound robotic reading this script, but I'm probably not gonna go off of it too much. But all right. So let's get into the actual stages. I need to talk about this. I have a lot to cover. All right. So there's the individual character sheet, which like at first just felt like getting the players together, but ended up being like super grueling because I realized that I didn't know a lot of my characters. Like, I have my main characters like Asadi and Kohen and Sammy and Kiba, or the team Asadi. But as far as like even the troop, I didn't know them as well as I thought I knew them. So I thought it was just going to be like a taking inventory of everybody, and it ended up being way more than I thought it was going to be. And these were like important characters too, so it's not like I could just be like, oh yeah, just figure out my main 4 and then everybody else is like secondary characters. Everybody has a storyline, and like the moving elements in their storylines were important, and the like goals and stuff were important. So I had to actually figure a lot of that out on the fly, a lot more than I thought I would have to figure out on the fly. Not really on the fly, because I'm not pantsing it, because I was planning it out. So, but I had to figure out a lot of that stuff. A lot more than I thought I would have to figure it out. Alright, so I feel like the easiest way to talk about this is to break down the categories. So pull up the sheets. me. Pull up the sheets, and we're gonna go through them like one by one. So the first field is mush mouth again. The first field is biology or biography. Jesus. We're gonna get through this today. The first field is biography, but that actually ended up being the last field to be filled out every single time, because summarizing the character involved like knowing the character, so I had to like do the rest of the sheet and then come back and put like an elevator pitch of who the character was. So even though biography was first on the list, it ended up being the last one to be filled out. The next one, which is actually the first field to be filled out, was regional location, which is I just mentioned where they were born and like where they grew up / live now / spend most of their time. And the reason why I make this distinction is because like where somebody's born isn't necessarily like where they identify as having like grown up. So like the city, could be somewhere else, but it's important to know the city that they were born in, or the region that they were born in, because it's part of their character and part of their story. Or if it was important, then I needed to put that down and make that distinction. Alright, age is pretty self-explanatory, you think, but Pokemon got kind of tricky because they don't age the same way as humans, and I haven't figured out if I want the way they age to be like universal for all Pokemon or different for each species of Pokemon like it is for different species of animals in real life. So I ended up giving my human characters ages, but categorizing my Pokemon by general terms, like young adult, middle-aged, teen, child, whatever. Next up is species, which is also pretty self-explanatory. Like, if it's a human, I put down human. If it's a Pokemon, I put down Pokemon. If it's an aberrant, which I feel like aberrants can go in the next category, but I generally put them in the species, then I would put that down. The only more specific distinction that I would make is if a character was of mixed species, and that's important to their storyline. So then I put down the whole gamut of like what matters. So like what species their parents are, what species their grandparents are, that whole heritage. Okay, next are class / identities. And that also I feel like sounds self-explanatory, but here's where it gets kind of hairy. So I had to list out the 4 main identities / classes that are important to characters over the entire story, whether they're self-defined or assigned to them. So like whether they know that they're that identity or class, or whether it's something that's like projected onto them from society. And this was like the entire, like I mentioned, the entire story. So having 4 spaces was not optimal sometimes, because like characters change their or characters like take on different identities and stuff throughout the length of the story. So I had to pick like the main ones. Funnily enough, I ended up discovering a lot of sexualities in this section, and that was just not something that I was expecting. Like, I have characters, and I have characters who have their sexualities that I already knew about, but in this section in particular, when I was thinking about like, man, how does this character identify, whether they're like, they identify as a trainer, or an aberrant could technically be like an identity, but then like sexuality came up a lot, and I was like, man, and it was a nice way to like play with, especially since sexuality is handled slightly different in Holland. First, it's not like a one-to-one analogous thing with like how we handle it in Western society anyway. So it was nice to like put that out there and then like have that to play with, later on. Alright, so affiliations are the next one. And those I actually often got confused with the last category sometimes, because like an affiliation can be like a group that you're affiliated with, but then also some people identify with like groups that they're affiliated with. So, but basically classes / identities involve the character's state of being, and then affiliations involve how they interact with that state of being, which that's how I like distinguish between the two. So like 4 important like religions or jobs, teams they're a part of, etc. Next up on the list were relationships, and those can get just having to think about like, oh, these are my 5 main relationships, could get really, really hairy because of the amount of characters that I have in Leftovers. So to mitigate headache, I divided everyone's relationship sections into 4 subsections, which were teams, specifically Pokemon teams, family, friends, and romantic interests. And then I limited each section to 5 people per section. So like you can only have 5 romantic interests, 5 friends, and not like overall like in the entire story, but the main the important ones. Anyway, there is probably more, romantic interests. Like you can have like a crush or whatever. The character can have like a crush or whatever, but that's not what I'm putting down. I'm only putting down the romantic interests that have an influence on their storyline. Or like their family, friends, whatever, that have an influence on their storyline. And then obviously there's going to be overlaps. Like you can have friends that you consider family, or you can have romantic interests that you consider friends. But I tried to repeat as little as possible and put the characters where they fit best. Funnily enough, I feel like there's a lot of little things that happened when I was like working on this that are just like kind of things that I finally look back on. Like the number of quote-unquote unnamed parents in the section is rampant. It's bad because like the goal is not to figure that out in detail, like not to figure out like what their parents' names are and all this other extra stuff, but to figure out or to mention that they exist and they're important. Okay, so next page. Okay. So with the next page, I remember explicitly feeling like, wow, so this is where the masochism begins, because the amount of brain power that I had to put into these next sections was redonkulous. And I know it's one of those things where it's like, well, yeah, you gotta figure out your character's main goals and main fears. Like, that's pretty basic stuff. But for me, for someone who was used to figuring out my character's stuff across the span of, 2-something years, naturally as it came to me, it was hard to, sit down and actually not just figure the stuff out, not just, come up with what their stuff is supposed to be, but to also convince myself that it was okay to commit to that sort of thing, and then to also let myself know that I have some wiggle room, but it has to be phrased specifically so that it's whenever I do have that wiggle room, it's wiggle room within a framework, or I have the foundation basically, and then I can deviate off that foundation instead of not having any foundation at all and having to come up with it on the spot later or as the story is going, and then that stuff becomes incongruous with their previous actions and all this other stuff. It was just a lot of brain work, okay? Just believe me. Just take my word for it. But for the next sections, I'm gonna group main goal and main fear together, and then silver lining and fatal flaw together. So the reason why I group those together is that they actually, each pair actually ended up working in tandem, which I did not expect at all, but here's what I had to put down for both of those. So for main goal and main fear, I had to determine the character's main goal and fear, whether they understood or knew that to be the case or not, which is an important distinction that I learned from Abby Emmons, who, if you remember, Abby Emmons is the one who made the original version of the narrative worksheets that I was using, the 3-act structure worksheets, and she had notes and stuff in her template. She had notes and stuff in her template where she was, made a distinction of whether your character knows the stuff or not, you need to put it down, because that knowing or unknowing can be part of the story. So that's what I ended up going with for the character sheets too. All of the stuff, whether they know it or not, is a part of who they are and who their character is. So the hardest part was boiling down the actions that I knew they had to take, each of the characters had to take, into 2 central aspects that govern them. Trying to figure out, especially for characters that I've already written before, characters that are already in the story, trying to look at them and examine what their actions are, and then retroactively create a goal with that in mind and a fear with that in mind, was I think a lot of the major brain work for other characters that I hadn't really that were new for this process, or that I hadn't really taken into account. That was regular brain work. But for Asadi and everybody, it was okay, I gotta really look at what concise elevator pitch can I give for Asadi's goals that still matches up with, the older styles of writing that I had back when I first started Leftovers, and like the older styles of characterization that I had back when I first started Leftovers. So yeah, so like I said, for other characters that I was already writing, I discover their goals, and fear is like the same two sides of the same coin. But like for characters I wasn't familiar with, I could then manufacture that dichotomy as I worked these things out for them for the first time. So next up is the silver lining and the fatal flaw, which was another surprising pair, but less surprising than I think the main goal and the main fear, because like good and bad qualities are naturally paired together. I feel like in media, like if you have a silver lining, you have a fatal flaw. Like that's just kind of how I feel like characters are like character sheets pair those together. The hardest parts, though, when it came to this, was divorcing the word flaw from being an inherently bad thing and stripping silver lining from its inherently good connotation, specifically for characters, like when it comes to the silver lining part, characters that I had to, that have, like, unsavory aspects about them, or that do like pretty shitty things, I had to figure out silver linings for them. And then the characters that I consider the good guys, who are the ones like that I had the hardest time figuring out the fatal flaws for, and specifically fatal flaws that aren't just petty, non-influential things like they don't like this thing, or they don't like this person, or they don't like to eat fruit, like little stuff like that. I really wanted to go beneath the surface to like get to the core of their characters, whether that like ran the risk of painting them in a negative light or not. So that was like, for instance, like Asadi's fatal flaw is that she's both easily overwhelmed by and secretly pretty stubborn towards pursuing certain goals, which creates a hostile mental environment where the result is that she's pretty unforgiving / hard on herself in the face of failure, even if it's due to stuff that's outside of her control, which isn't necessarily like, it isn't inherently a bad trait like the word flaw would have you believe, but it sure doesn't make her life any better, and it definitely leads to like her doing some problematic stuff, whether that's to herself or to other people, or just like or in the vicinity of other people, etc., etc. So just basically figuring out the unsavory parts of good characters, and then figuring out the somewhat good parts of like unsavory characters. It was an interesting thought experiment, honestly. And then also there was that the idea of them working in tandem, because even though Asadi's fatal flaw is like her stubbornness towards certain goals, it's also a silver lining of hers that she will push herself, even though we haven't seen it as much. Like, it's something I definitely want to focus on later, but we haven't seen it as much in the recent chapters anyway. But she will, push herself. It's just sometimes that pushing becomes toxic. So, and that's where the fatal flaw comes in. So, yeah. Foundational events. Okay, here's the last one for this section. Foundational events is the big one. I believe there's such a strong connection between the things that we experience coming up and what we're dealing with today. And you better bet the Leftovers is going to focus on that when it comes to like my specific characters. The rule here is that I can only put things that happen up to the start of Leftovers, because this isn't a plot point list. It's not me figuring out like what happens to them over the course of the story. Rather, it's like a best / worst of hits list, where we figure out like what made the character who they are today, the bad things, the good things, the good experiences or whatever, that made the character who they are today. So then we know like where they start when Leftovers starts. An important distinction I had to make here is that it's not where they start, where they're introduced in the story, because there are a lot of characters who aren't introduced until way later in the story. but rather when leftovers starts, everything up to that point, whether they're introduced or not, is what I would put down for foundational events. Things like, this is not really a big spoiler, but Asadi being attacked by Pucciano when she was younger, when she was 10, stuff like that. Those types of foundational events that like change the core of their person or have specifically lasting impacts on where they go in the story. This functioned as a way to get to know some of my lesser characters more intimately before their introduction, but also a list of events that I can, like I was implying, and probably will touch on in a certain like side project that I'll announce at some point when I get the logo together. But just know it's happening. There's a thing that's happening once I plan everything out anyway. So yeah, I think that is it for the character sheets. It is it for the character sheets. So after I put down, all the character sheets, now mind you, I had 32 characters that I had to fill out all of this information for. So it took me a while. It took me a little bit, okay? So I was like, oh, finally, I'm done. Like, I can move on to planning episodes. It's not the case. That was not the case because, like, surprise, I had 32 plates that I was spinning at the same time with no idea of when I could, like, sit some down to rest or when maybe some plates might actually be better off being combined. So this takes me to the next stage of of this whole thing, this whole section, the character bit, which is called the checklist. And basically the checklists were pretty much what they are. No, there's more explanation. So continuing the frameworks aesthetic, I created separate groups of checklists which were color coded for each season and divided it up by storyline. And each character had like 5 lines, five lines, checklist lines, and then each checklist line for each character had like an established win section for when I like go in and I plan the actual episodes, and now I know that like, okay, this is going to be established in chapter 1 or whatever. I had like a specific set of rules for this checklist, so I didn't go off into the night with just random shit. So the rules were: the checklist is not for writing out a character's actions through the story, but listing out aspects of their personality / lives that need to be established during the seasons. And I forgot to mention too, but I had there was like a landing page, so each season had all of the characters, all 32 of the characters, with 5 points or 5 boxes to check for each of them. But then right before we start getting into the characters, each season also had a landing page where I described or I summarized each storyline. And I'll probably, if I show this, there's 3 storylines. I think I said that before. It's not really a big spoiler, but you'll probably see the names of the storylines when I show the pages or when I show what page I'm going to show for the checklist, the first page. But each checklist, each season had a landing page where it was, I summarized each storyline, like what they're going through during this part of the season, or during this season, and then I had a list of world building, a checklist of world building stuff where I needed to like write down what I needed to have specifically established in the world for this season. So that like works, in tandem with I started doing it. I started out doing the world building checklist, and then I would go into the characters. But then once I got more into it, like seasons, like the later seasons, I would do the characters first and then come back to the world, because like once I knew that, like what their struggles were, that's when I knew like what other stuff needed to be established within the world building in order to like quantify their struggles, or to like give their struggles like a framework to exist within. That makes sense. So yeah, trying not to run out of steam here because I still have a lot more left. but let me see. Oh, so an example of what would go on a checklist for a character, for like each character across like different seasons. Like season 1 could have hint that they want to be taken more serious as a trainer, and then season 2 could have established that they're taking steps to get into the serious trainer scene. And hint, establish, and show were all like operative terms or like main directions that I used on the checklist, with hint being like maybe throw in an easily missed passing conversation / visual sign, and then establish / show. Man, that lisp. Establish / show means have the character like say or visually express intent outright. So those were like certain things, and then there was times where I wouldn't use hint or establish or show at all, and it was just like this more. Oh, another one I forgot to mention is explore. Explore is the next step after establish and show, where you have like the characters say the stuff visually outright. So you'll have somebody say like, I want to be or I want to get closer to my brother or something, right? Actually, you know what? Here's an example for all of these. Not actually examples from leftovers, but like just random examples. So hint, maybe throw in an easily missed passing conversation / visual sign would be like, okay, someone, you see a character and they're texting somebody that seems like they're important. And then establish / show would be the character says, oh yeah, I have a sibling, I have a family member that I like to text, or I like to make sure they're okay. And then the next part, explore, would be to explore the relationship between that character and their relationship, their sibling, whatever. So not everybody got to the explore stage, because I only have so many hands, I can only spin so many plates, but like at least they got to establish or show. So the this part was definitely the most grueling. Like I thought the character sheet part was grueling. This part here was literally the closest I got to like planning the story without actually planning the individual chapters. So it was even more brain power when it came to like this section. So there's several like, I guess, things that I noticed while I was working on this. So I had a lot of moments of connecting storylines, which is what I meant when I said that like some plates might be able to be combined, because I would have like, oh, this character I don't really know where this character is going, but like, what if this character met up with this character and they had their whole thing going on, and so I could kind of like have them piggyback off of each other's storylines. The most important thing that I realized is that not everyone has to have a bunch of stuff going on. Like some people are just going to be like two checkmark chumps, right? Mainly for my sanity. Like if you only have 2 things going on, don't worry, I still love you, but like you just don't have the whole onion plot thing going on, where there's just a bunch of different layers and stuff like that, because some of these characters have just way too much going on, and I'm gonna have to figure out how to make it all make sense. But then I had those moments where I had characters that maybe don't have a lot going on, and a lot of those were like younger characters, because like you can only have a character going to school, and if it's not like the main focus of the story, you can only have a character going to school and exploring like their friendships and drama so much, if it's not the main point of the story, obviously, and it's not the main point of the story to see the troop kids going to school, but I do want to explore that at some point. So next is oh man, speaking of the troop kids, all right, so planning across the duration of the story meant I had to face this weird, and maybe it's not weird, maybe it's something that like everybody knows about at this point, but like I had to face something that I'm calling generational character development scaling. So basically, all right, the troop are kids, right? All the training troops are kids. Asadi is nearing adulthood. Steven is a young adult. Gidget is an older adult, etc., etc., etc. And all these ages in life develop at significantly different rates. So, like, kids are going to go through a lot quicker transitions between phases in drama due to hormones. But adults, young and old adults, have a slower rate of learning new things and having experiences once they're out of the forced socialization of academia. But these new experiences that they do get to experience have a more significant impact on their livelihoods. And that's mainly because of their ability to like properly reflect and be autonomous. But like, the reason why I'm saying all this is that because like, while it's a nice sentiment to want all of my characters to go through strife throughout the story and only to end up like happily having learned things about themselves and the world and all this, the troop cannot be like, it's impossible. They cannot be in the same mental space as Asadi by the end of the story, because they will be in different stages of their lives during which the passage of time is processed differently. So for Asadi, like 3 years, a lot more stuff is going to happen, a lot more significant things are going to happen, or a lot less significant things are going to happen for Asadi in the span of 3 years, versus the troop, where it's like a lot might be happening, but not all stuff that's going to impact their lives in the way they think about stuff, if that makes sense. So, or to the point where they'll come out of like school having a big epiphany about themselves. Most of us come out of school confused. so yeah, it's like, and especially it was especially apparent for me when I realized that like by the time this story ends, the kids won't be older than Asadi was at the beginning of Leftovers. Like, Asadi is 19. They won't be older than her. And like, or they won't be older than her. I don't know if that came across as like will, but they won't be older than her. And Asadi at the beginning of Leftovers is very sheltered and very confused about her identity. And so it doesn't make sense to have the troop kids kind of grow to her level by the end of the story, physically, but then also like surpass where she has the amount of like development and stuff that she has throughout the duration of the story. It doesn't make sense for the troop to be at that same spot, because like they're essentially catching up to where Asadi was at the beginning of the story. So like life stage wise. So yeah. So I think that is it for the checklist. Go through it, write down which characters. Yeah. Okay. The final thing I had like in the script was just the established when section, where it was like I can figure out, when I'm planning the episodes or the chapters, I can jot down which episode that shows up in. I haven't figured out whether I want to check off stuff when I get to them, actually, like when I'm actually putting the episodes out, or check it off when I'm planning the episodes. It'll probably be the latter, because it doesn't make much sense to like check them off, I feel like. And that's what the established when section is for. I don't know. We'll figure it out. When I start like actually planning out the chapters and stuff, I will probably mention that in that episode of Leftovers Logs. So, all right, finally, the last stage, which is the most important documents. And I'm hot. I'm so hot in several different ways. I'm hot because I turned off my AC to do this recording, but I'm also hot because I literally got to the end of the checklist and I was like, holy shit, I'm finally done planning. I can planning like the characters and like world building. I'm finally done like the world building, and I can figure out what I can like actually start planning the story, and not in like a vague, nebulous way where I'm just like putting down checklist points of what I want to happen. I can actually figure out what's going to happen now. No, I couldn't. No, I couldn't. Cause like, I thought it was all Gucci, but like something kept nagging me at the back of my mind. I even had like a post character work celebration, but this thing was just always there. I was trying to sit down and be like, okay, let me work on these episodes. Let me, figure out how to work on these episodes first of all, which I still have yet to do. But like, I realized that I was so like the thing that kept nagging at the back of my mind. I realized I was so focused on frameworks and so afraid to get too specific in like the world building phase that I never actually figured out some aspects that I needed details for. Like how does the Pokemon League work? Specifically with this government, because we know how the Pokemon League works just like regularly. You get your 8 badges, you go to the Elite Four, but like now that I have all of this stuff specifically set for the government, it doesn't make sense for the league to work the same way, like I have to make it congruous with the rest of the world. What even are contests? Because like Solana wants to be a contest star. I need to know how contests work so I can figure out her storyline. And like the thing is, I was putting in things in the checklist of like Solana's contest storyline, and I don't even know how contests work at this point. It's just like, just pretty exposés, What are aberrants? Like, how do they work? I have Hazen. Hazen, for those of you who don't know, because I haven't said his name yet, and like that's totally not intentional, but I'm gonna play it off like it's intentional. But Hazen's the blue boy with the blue-haired boy with the ghosting ability. But Hazen and Phoebe, like I have those two, just don't know how exactly they work. Like how do aberrants aberrate, and then like a bunch of other categories and stuff too, mainly stuff that I can't mention because like it's very, very spoilery. Just like, how do those things work? Also, who is banging? Like, what is the reason? Someone is like throwing chairs around or something. But yeah, so I'm not gonna give the answers for these questions, but just know that there were 16 things I needed to figure out the answers for before I could move on, and I organized them into like a chart and everything because I couldn't fathom, or I couldn't like sit with myself and just think about the fact that I needed to figure out so much other stuff. I was hot. I was so upset. I was just like, please, I just want to get to planning episodes, but I need it. And that's okay. So that's the one thing I will say. The one thing I will say is if this episode is like 43 minutes long. That's the one thing I will say about this hiatus that I didn't expect it. I feel like it would be a little disingenuous to say that I didn't expect it, but like I wasn't focusing on it. I wasn't looking for this hiatus to turn me into an actual planner. I knew that I was gonna have some tendencies of like, I gotta plan this stuff out. But I still largely felt like I was just putting frameworks into place, and then I could just like go free willy, in planning the story and just, like return to my free on the fly ways. But like, no, I need actual answers and shit now. Like this hiatus has turned me into a planner, and I can't believe it. I'm disgusted. I can't believe I actually sat down and did 64 pages because each character had 2 different like pages of character sheets. And then on top of that, God, how many pages? oh man, I think it was like 7 pages. No, it was 6 pages, I believe, for each season of Leftovers. So I had like, for the checklist, I mean, so I had to do like 24/32. I forgot exactly how many, but like those checklists put me through it. And then on top of that, and I'm like complaining, but I'm very proud of myself, and I have like, yeah, I'm taking like a lot of pride in the fact that I was able to do this, and the fact that like it's done. Like, I have a sexy ass binder, right? 2 binders actually, because I have the regular and maybe I'll put a picture of them up or a video of them up when I talk about this. But I have the main binder, which has all my other stuff from the other episodes of Leftovers vlogs, those stages, and then I have like one binder of just like character stuff. Well, not specifically, it's just the checklist right now, because that I planned for that to be my binder of episode planning. So the checklist, I felt like needed to go in there or whatever. But yeah, I'm like proud of it. But the fact that I thought I was so close to being done with the initial planning stages, the like things I need to know before I get to stuff that I really want to work on stages. And then I needed to know more stuff in more detail too. Like, I'm almost willing to give this a tie with the checklist section for like the most brain work I've done in this whole thing, because I not only did I have to define stuff like how does the league work and how the contests work, but like I had to define them in a specific way to where we know what the actual rules and stuff are, so then I can ignore them and like have people, break them and shit in the actual thing. But I needed to know what the rules were before I could, break the rules, and coming up with the rules was surprisingly hard. But I am, specifically for contests, I am very proud of myself for what I came up with, and I can't wait to show you guys. Some of you know, but I can't wait to show you guys when the story starts. So yeah, back to the chart, back to the actual like questions themselves. So I organized them all into a chart. There were 16, and I organized them all into the chart. And on one side I put important stuff, and on the other side I put on the fly things, because there were still things that I could figure out like while I was writing and didn't really need to put more brain power into at the moment. So there were 11 important items and like 5 on the fly items, and I thought I could cheat, like, but I couldn't. Okay, so in my last hurrah, I spent the last 2 weeks as of this recording slaving over a hot Google document to figure out some stuff I really should have had hashed out at the beginning of this hiatus. But I will say, I am glad I waited until the end, because for like routes and aspects of the routes and aspects of characters that I fleshed out the last 2 stages, specifically in the I was gonna say specifically in the checklist, but it's kind of both of them, the checklist and the character sheets, that played a role. But those things played a direct role in figuring out like how these institutions could screw them over. I mean, like how they could operate, so characters can operate within them. So yeah, that is where I'm at for now. That was the last thing I needed to do before I could finally start planning out episodes. And I am so glad I got this episode of Leftovers Vlogs done, because I felt like I could, like, this was a milestone. I felt like I couldn't go on until I took stock of where I had been. So I'm glad that I finally, like, this is a pretty decent recording. I hope nothing happens with this recording that messes it up, but like, I'm just so relieved. I don't know if you can hear it in my voice. I'm so relieved. Because now now that I have this, I'm gonna put this episode together. I'm gonna, go to Premiere and slave over a hot Premiere document or whatever. And it's on to actually planning the episodes / chapters of Leftovers. Which is, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I mean, I actually wanted my original plan, just since we're like 6 months in, this is the halfway point of the hiatus, so a little bit of reflection. My original plan was to finish my character stuff in May, so that way I can start figuring out the episode. I could have all summer to figure out the episodes. We're not quite there. We didn't quite make it, but I do have all of July. My actual goal is to get episodes finished, or not finished per se, but like get the main skeletons of the seasons, like the episodes that I want to have planned out by August, which is going to be interesting because we start boot scooting and boogieing in August 1st at work, so we'll see how that goes, or at least that's how it was last year. But I want to get all of them done. I want to get all of the episodes written out, like a log line of what I want to happen by August, or is it 31st? Yeah, 31st, yeah. But then also, I would like to have at least 5, 6, 7, the more the merrier, chapters scripted out. So from September to December, I can just work on pages, like actual pages, which is scary because I haven't drawn Leftovers as a comic in forever. I should probably start warming up because I don't want it to be too hard. But I actually want to make my comeback in 2023, so I need to get my shit together and get on the ball so I can actually make pages, because I don't have any other pages, or I didn't have anything left over by the time I started this hiatus. So yeah, that's where I'm at now. I think that's it. Oh, I mentioned it in the beginning, but the next episode that I have planned is where I'll answer questions that were sourced from everyone a few weeks ago, from YouTube comments, and then I also ask stuff on Discord. So if you put some questions out there, then that's your episode. I will be talking about character stuff and world building stuff and all of that. But for now, I am going to end this recording and turn on the AC because it's hot. So yeah. See you guys. Oh wait, no, I'm sorry. I hope you have a good one. I hope you enjoyed. And Pakara signing out.